Welcome back to my channel. Wendy Renee here. So excited to have this next guest on. I have been eagerly anticipating showing this to you, but for some reason I had weird audio. I could not seem to figure this out. So if any of you in the audience are audio techs, or you can offer me some suggestions, I really appreciate it. I think what happened was I had one microphone on while another microphone was still on. That does not make for good sound. So anyway, that's why I delayed in getting this next upload, so thank you for your patience. Jonam Ross is the founder and creator of Religion Rehab. He comes to us from the UK, and what Jonam has started with his Religion Rehab is fantastic. Again, on this channel, we love to talk about healing and how you can move forward after a life in high control religion and narcissistic abuse. I am really honored to bring Jonam on the show and share his information with you. So let's go. Before we begin, I want to thank you so much for liking, subscribing, and sharing my videos. We just hit 1,500 subscribers. That's really amazing. Coming from a girl who was once watching videos, hiding under her covers. Oh my gosh. I should do a blooper reel. With every subscriber, it just means we're that much closer. With every subscriber, it just proves every subscriber that much. How now, wow cow. Proving we are every subscriber just the arsonist had oddly shaped feet. I can never get this out. Unique New York. I'm just kidding. It's a sickness. Something's wrong with me. But I didn't have a mountain, I had a camera. When all you do is talk to a camera, you start to lose it a little bit. For every what was I saying? I keep saying for. With every subscriber, it just means we're that much further along in showing that there is happiness and joy and peace on the other side of high control religion. As always, we have a fun little community over there on TikTok where we have some really cool conversations in the comments, so feel free to join us over there. And also, I'm on Instagram. Jonam, it is such an honor to have you on the show. Thank you so much for being on here. I'm really interested in the work that you're doing. And for those of you who don't know Jonam Ross, I really want to introduce you to him. He was born and raised in this religion, and he's coming up from the UK. So, Jonam, why don't you introduce yourself to our audience and tell us what kind of work you're doing?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Wendy. It's great to be here. Yeah, so I was born and raised in the organization. I was disfellowshipped 5 years ago, and finally started to do the research over the past couple of years. I left, but I never quite did the research to stop believing in it. It was still kind of lurking in the background. So I was moving on with the rest of my life, but there were just some areas that were stuck. So finally, COVID happened. I was like feeling this anxiety of, well, what if they're right? What if I'm on the wrong side of this theocratic fence and I'm going to get fireballed? And I thought, you know what? I've paid for too much damn training to tolerate this from myself, frankly. So I started doing the research, and along the way, I realized, well, obviously this is a cult, it's all wrong. But also, so many people are struggling with the things that I myself struggled with in the past.
Right.
And with my professional background being in hypnotherapy and NLP, I was seeing all of these challenges, whether it's social anxiety or feeling lack of confidence, or feeling like we have to be social chameleons and put up smoke screens so that people can't really reject the real us. All of this stuff, I saw it again and again, and I said, well, it's just too solvable to leave it unsupported. So that's where this whole project started. So at the beginning of last year, when COVID and lockdown kicked off, I had this anxiety in the back of my mind going, well, what if they're right? What if I'm the wrong side of this theocratic fence? I'm going to get fireballed and all of this stuff.
Right.
And eventually I was like, do you know what? I've just paid for too much training to tolerate this from myself. And I got sick of it. So I did the research to see, is this true or is this not true? Very quickly realized it was all a big con. But then along the way, I saw literally tens of thousands of other ex-witnesses like ourselves who are in these online forums, but really struggling with some of these issues decades down the line, whether it's lack of confidence, whether it's real low self-esteem, feeling unworthy, grieving the living. all of these challenges that we face.
Right.
And because of my background in hypnotherapy and NLP mainly, that those are all just solvable problems, and we just need to know how to do it. So that's where this entire project came from now. So now my entire focus is using hypnotherapy to help other ex-witnesses and survivors of other toxic religions as well.
For those of you who don't know, Jonam has started this amazing program called Religion Rehab. So can you talk a little bit about that and what inspired you to start this and how it's going?
Yeah. So what inspired me to start it was really seeing how little practical support there was out there.
Mm.
There are quite a few resources in terms of understanding the problems of religious trauma, which is fantastic, right? We need to understand it. But then the question of what to do about it, information was quite thin on the ground, as was support.
Mm-hmm.
Also, my own background in NLP and hypnotherapy is very, very results driven. So we want to know, how can you create change, not just understand why we're miserable and be informed about it. So bringing all of that to this and saying, well, I wish that I had this support. I wish that I had resources that would help me unpick the religious doctrines from my subconscious mind. I wish that I had something more tailored to help me understand, well, which of these thoughts are actually mine, which of these are just echoes from religious programming,
Mm-hmm.
and then what can I do to then upgrade that operating system of my own mind. I really wanted that, and I was looking for that, and it just didn't exist. There are lots of personal development programs out there in other areas, but there was just nothing specialized in the way that I wanted it to be.
Mm-hmm.
So I decided to make one, make one for myself, essentially. So that was really the inspiration. And then the more I did it, the more I started speaking to people and sharing this work and seeing, well, what are people interested in? I expected a tiny response. I would send a survey out expecting 10 responses, and I'd get hundreds.
Wow.
And so there was this real obvious hunger of people looking for solutions to problems, people who aren't happy to just sit and stagnate in the past, people who are looking for ways to move forward and make progress in good time without cutting corners. So I saw that there were these kindred spirits, and I knew from firsthand experience that this is a need that when it's unmet, it sucks. And when you have that need met,
Mm-hmm.
it's just such a relief. So that was really the inspiration behind it. And it's really snowballed, so that now it's actually consolidated into a 12-week program that I do with people, where it's, you know, educational modules, videos, journaling exercises, group calls. There's hypnotherapy in the mix as well, and we have one-on-one sessions. So it's really crystallized into something very reliable and that gets real profound results for people as well. So I'm very happy. It's early days because it only started last year, but already we've gained a lot of ground and seems to be doing a lot of good for people.
It's just fascinating because you also have that added layer of expertise and experience being in the Jehovah's Witness organization. I know it's called Religion Rehab, but ultimately every religion has their nuances and has their I mean, with mind control, it's pretty much all the same. But with regard to Jehovah's Witnesses, it is my belief and my understanding that as Jehovah's Witnesses, this is, of all religions, this is the most impactful with regard to the shunning. And throughout our lives, we are convinced and programmed to believe that we actually deserve that treatment. And so therefore we tend to, I can speak for myself personally, when I was disfellowshipped, convinced myself that I deserved it, that it was the best thing that ever happened to me. And so after that, what I did was I was kind of looking for situations and relationships and experiences that also treated me like that, and the behaviors just continued. So I find it interesting that once we wake up, it's kind of like I woke up, now what? Right? Like a lot of people want to move on, but don't really know what to do because we're convinced that, well, it's a consequence and we have to deal with that consequence, but that's not really true, right?
Yeah. No, it's not. It took me a long time to realize that it actually wasn't okay. Did you do the same thing where you actually defend the disfellowshipping arrangement? Like people might say, worldly friends are like, oh, have you seen your family over the holidays? Oh no, they don't speak to me. That's barbaric. So no, it's just fellowshipping, and it's so wonderful because of this reason and that reason.
Yeah, well, I used to explain it to people as, well, basically, it's like my parents are disciplining me and told me just to sit in the corner for a little while and not
Yeah,
participate with the family, and that made some bizarre sense to me,
yeah,
actually.
yeah. I was like a covert pioneer when I was disfellowshipped. Well, I
Oh,
still am, but
explain.
before, I was like,
About this in one of our conversations. I find it funny. Explain this. Like you're a
yeah,
pioneer, even though you weren't allowed to pioneer, because I did the same
yeah.
thing.
Yeah, I was like undercover, plainclothes JWing. I was, speaking to people and priming them for the next time a witness knocked on their door. Like, oh gosh, this world situation, isn't it shocking? Well, I'm no expert, but I did read about the Bible a little bit, and it was saying about this and that, and said in the last days such and such would happen, but Armageddon's not what you think it is, and well, you'll have to ask someone who offers to speak to you about it. And it was.
Meanwhile, you can't talk to anybody, but you're trying to bring them
Mhm.
in. I remember
Yeah,
one
I was.
experience. I went to the memorial while I was disfellowshipped. I actually brought people to this memorial because I went to the English and I was in the Spanish congregation at
Right.
the same time trying to learn the language. So I went to the English memorial disfellowshipped, and then I went to the Spanish memorial disfellowshipped, and I ended up bringing people that I was witnessing to while I was disfellowshipped. Only I couldn't talk to anyone knowing I was disfellowshipped. So I was like, I can't speak the language, so you're gonna have to talk to people. I can't.
Ah,
I totally forgot about that. So it's just this crazy behavior that we adapt
yeah.
ourselves to. So a question I do want to ask you though, in our previous conversation, we spoke a lot about NLP, and
Mm,
I loved the NLP course. I got certified in it. And I noticed that for me personally, I specifically took NLP because it's used by narcissists, it's used by cult
mm.
leaders. And I actually took the course to pick up on the coercive words and nuances that the organization uses. Can you speak to the differences between using it for good versus using it for manipulation?
Yeah, that's a cool question. It's my favorite topic.
Mhm.
Um, NLP really is the art of influence, and influence is creating change, right? Is creating a deliberate change in an individual or in a situation, and that change can be good or it can be bad. It can be for someone's best interests, or it can be manipulative and coercive. So it's very much like any other tool. The whole cliche of a scalpel can be used to save a knife or save a life, or it can be used to murder someone. So it depends how you use it. In terms of the difference, when I speak to people who are curious about how to protect themselves from manipulation,
Right.
I wrote a whole series of articles about this recently, but the real thing it boils down to is if you don't know who you are, if you don't know what your values are, and you don't know what you want in life, then it will be damn near impossible to know if you're being manipulated, because
Wow.
being manipulated is where you're being taken off course in your own life and being coerced and pulled into alignment with someone else's values, someone else's outcomes. If you're kind of drifting along aimlessly and you don't know who you are and all of the things I just said,
Mhm.
then you can't know that you're lost because you don't know where you're going to begin with.
Mm.
So I can teach people all of these things to look out for, all of these cues to see, okay, if someone's more predatory by nature, or if someone is deceiving, or if they're having all of these tells that show you if someone's being more predatory and manipulative. But we will automatically ignore all of that if we have no sense of ourselves and no sense of our own purpose,
Mm.
because then just the comfort of having someone tell us what to do is in itself intoxicating. There's a lot of emphasis, and your question was about how manipulative people use it, and we can talk about that.
Mhm.
What's even more important, I think, is our own individual susceptibility.
Mhm.
um, you can go into any author's like Facebook group, pick an influential author, Brené Brown, any, like,
Yeah.
generally good people.
Yeah.
If you go into their Facebook groups, you'll see that there's this weird cult-like environment where people are, using the quotations, using the words. There's this insider language. There's this kind of us versus them thing in very small ways, but it starts to develop in pockets. And the leader, the author, isn't doing anything to create that. There's this human instinct to say, oh, please, just someone in a position of authority, someone who knows better than me, to give me some orders from on high. Tell me how I should be. Tell me how I should speak. Tell me how I should act. And when people are still healing and still discovering and developing themselves, then it's very easy to just find something like a bigger fish to swim in the wake of. So until we fix that within ourselves, until we heal that and develop that stability, then we'll be super vulnerable to narcissists and manipulators, even if we know exactly what to look out for.
Fantastic. That's such a good point. What is the first step to finding who you are? I know it's it borderline crossing over into philosophy as well,
Right.
to finding who you are. It's interesting. I just did a video specifically geared toward teenagers because we tend to, and it's not something we're cognitively aware of, but we tend to recreate our dysfunction in our lives. So I personally was raised in a very dysfunctional home, and I didn't seek out a dysfunctional home after leaving the home. I just felt comfortable in dysfunction, and I didn't even realize that. So for people who are watching this and they're looking to change their mindset, or they're looking to pay attention to their susceptibility, what do you think is the first couple of steps to recognizing that? Because I'll be honest with you, we're in the era of everybody is a guru. We're in the era of everybody knows a guy. Everyone kind of has all their information. Everyone's personal development in and of itself could be a
international speaker.
Yes. So what do you suggest for people to kind of get this perceptive acuity?
I think one concept that I always like to share is that if someone's trying to sell you a map, then that's kind of a red flag, because the map that they've developed is for themselves, right? It's from their own experience. If you have people who are showing you how to become your own cartographer, how you can discover more about yourself, how you can navigate the terrain of your own life and your own mind, that is a bit more trustworthy in my mind, because you're not being told what to do, you're being shown how to explore and shown how to be independent. So that's just a rule of thumb to throw out there to begin with. On a more detailed note, the way I always start with people is taking an inventory of where you are now in detail, but then reverse engineering that. There's a great program, if you Google the self-authoring suite, it's cheap. It's like $30, I think, the last time I saw. They're very well documented and very, very helpful for many thousands of people. The first step in that is you divide your life up to this point into time periods, epochs, they call it. So let's say there's 7 time periods. Then you divide those 7 time periods again and say, well, what were the most impactful emotional experiences during that, say 3 or 4 years? And then you write those down, and then you unpack them and say, well, how did that impact me? And then what else could I learn from each one of these experiences? And what you end up doing is you get this sense of your own personal history, rather than it being glossed over, rather than it just being that we've been carried along on the winds of time and fate, as it were. We're actually becoming more rooted to our own history, which then lets us know how we can begin to move forward. When we leave the organization and any high control group, we can feel untethered and adrift, because we've lost our sense of identity. We've lost all of our social network, our support network, probably family, loved ones, maybe children as well. All of these things that helped us have that stability. It's like, well, I know who I am because I'm my child's father. I know who I am because I'm my wife's husband, or I'm the ministerial servant who does the sound desk. All these little anchor points that give us that sense of stability, they were taken away. So if we leave that unchecked, we'll try and find anchor points in other things, like, another cult, or or maybe avoidant mechanisms like addiction and things of that nature. By doing an exercise where you take inventory in your own mind, in your own history, you begin to root yourself in your own path, in your own journey. That in itself is hugely therapeutic. Like if you only did that, if you only just sat and did that whole epochs and experiences exercise, you would get huge therapeutic results just from that, and that's been proven. Once you've done that, though, you have this sense of continuity of here's who I have been, here's what's got me to this point, here are the experiences, these are some common themes and patterns. And with that self-awareness, you can then navigate and say, well, I want to improve in this area, so I'm going to learn these skills, I'm going to take a class or read a book, and you're being more present in the reality of your life rather than in being kind of swept up in the distractions.
It sounds a lot like when you want to change your diet or change nutrition. For example, if you think of a literal dinner plate, you don't take things away entirely. You slowly crowd that out by adding things in. So say you're trying to you're getting away from starches, let's just say. So you don't remove the starches entirely. You just gradually add more of a protein, add more of a vegetable. And if you take something away entirely, it looks like an empty space. It looks like I need to fill this space. I'll fill it with bread, or I'll fill it with an unhealthy carbohydrate. And so I liken what you're saying to that analogy as well. Like we can easily just remove the organization and get it out of our lives. And in a moment, those things are removed from us. So we have to easily fill that space. And sometimes we fill that space with a surrogate, right? So for example, I'm sure in your case, I know my particular therapist happens to be a man, and sometimes we look for a surrogate of what we lost. And that's because we have grown up to not trust ourselves. We've grown up to push that intuition down. We've grown up with an intellect that has been untapped. And so when we help people to fill that space with something wholesome, I think the challenge there is a lot of this goes back to giving yourself permission to, especially as a woman, giving yourself permission. I'm curious, you said that you had this background while you were in the organization.
Yeah.
What was that like for you? That's a pretty good example of cognitive dissonance.
I was an expert at cognitive dissonance. If you were a well-behaved Jehovah's Witness, I was the guy in the congregation who you'd talk to, but like you'd count the hours just to kind of justify the fact that you were talking to me. It was that kind of. It was that kind of thing. I was baptized, but yeah, my family were kind of black sheep. My parents, before I was born, were like really into sales, and a part of sales training was personal development. So that stuff was present in just my family growing up. And then in the UK, we have a guy called Darren Brown. Well, he's more international now. He's like a big mentalist entertainer, very cool, very science-based, but it looks magical. So I was hooked. I was like, well, I know this is just science, it's just neuroscience and trickery, and it was just fascinating. From there, I thought, well, surely the pinnacle of creation is the human mind. And so I thought, well, I'm going to explore it, I'm going to learn more about it. I never went to school, wasn't going to be allowed to go to college. And I thought, well, my peers are going to have this huge advantage over me on paper. But what's the common denominator in every single enterprise, in every single situation in life, is human beings, is human consciousness. So I thought, if I can learn more about this, if I can get more well-versed in reading and understanding human beings, including myself, then I'll be able to make up for that advantage that they have on paper. I'll be able to transform that in my own life. So that was where it started. And by the time people were saying to me, oh, hypnosis is the work of the devil.
Oh, yeah.
You'll empty your mind and then demons will come marching in and take over. As
not
if they're
demons,
not.
No.
As if, like, where are they when we're asleep every night?
Right. Or doing yoga. Like, yoga is also allowing room for the demons too, I guess. I don't know.
Like dropping into a deeply hypnotic state sat in a convention with that dreary, echoing kind of sound. That's fine, but no, don't relax when someone's telling you to picture nice things. No. So by the time people were saying that to me, I was like, this is clearly bullshit, because I knew the science behind it. So I knew that what was being commonly spoken was, I was like, well, they're just mistaken. So it became a don't ask, don't tell thing.
I see.
So I kind of, behind closed doors, I was the mad scientist who was interested in this stuff. My JW friend Sam would like treat me like a social experiment by giving me this real wicked reputation in social circles, to see, when he introduced me to them, like people would think I was this masterful MI6 level manipulator kind of dude. It was great fun, but yeah, it was this weird thing where I knew it's not commonly accepted, but I was like, well, if God made the brain and God made the mind, he's not going to be offended at me being curious and honoring it. So that was how I justified it to myself while I was in.
I see. It's interesting because when you think of the conventions and you think of the meeting, even the broadcasts, there is this sort of mind-numbing, it sounds like hypnosis. The way I remember being at the conventions and just being in this daze of, but you have to feel grateful for it. So it was kind of like, thank you. I feel kind of numb. And then you go out to the real world and you're like, wait a minute, where was I? Where even was I all weekend? And you're left exhausted and you're told, no, this isn't good exhausted, but I don't feel good.
No.
So it's kind of like compartmentalizing how you truly feel about yourself and how you feel about the situation and what you're told to believe too, as well. So in your experience, does hypnosis and NLP, do those things, can it unravel indoctrination in what you're told to believe? Can it make room for your own self, your true self, to emerge?
Yeah, used correctly, for sure. Because really, like I said, NLP and hypnosis, it's the art and science of how human beings are influenced, right? So there's a huge emphasis on exploring and empowering your subconscious mind, giving your subconscious mind different skills to be able to process negativity, for instance. Some mental strategies work and some don't. So, for instance, in education, you can have a class full of children and say, here's a list of words, memorize these words, and there's your English class. Some kids will be the great spellers and some will not. The ones who are great spellers are the ones who instinctively have the same mental strategy as other successful spellers. People who are good at spelling tend to make mental images of a word, and then they'll kind of get a good feeling if it looks right, and if there's a letter out of place, you feel wrong. I'm quite a good speller, so I can look at a page and I'm like, oh, I feel kind of sick, and then I'll find the spelling mistake, and it's like, oh, fix that, and I'll feel okay. The same thing is true in terms of other mental strategies. So with the spellers, what you can do, you can take the bad spellers who are trying to sound it out, which just doesn't work in English. You can teach them, hey, make a picture, practice that for a bit. You turn the dunces, the educationally disabled children, into A-grade students by training a new mental strategy. There's a book called Learning Excellence where there's just a ton of research on that. Teaching Excellence is the name of it. The same is true with other mental strategies. So whether it's processing trauma, dealing with negative emotions, building relationships, re-engineering our inner voice, our internal dialogue so it supports us rather than undermining us, all of those things, those are outcomes that are totally possible. With a field like NLP combined with hypnotherapy, you're retraining those mental strategies to actually create that outcome.
So basically, it's igniting neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire itself. In one of my other videos, someone left a comment, and I've heard it before, but I want to credit the commenters. She said that feelings are not facts. And I think sometimes when we're going through this process of deconstruction and unraveling indoctrination, sometimes our feelings feel like facts because it feels very real, our experience. And I love this approach because if we can approach this, I always say I look at the organization as I look at it objectively. Now, that's a process. I look at the organization objectively as I look at a narcissistic parent, right? So when you look at something objectively, and then it's almost like it's a really good idea to become a student of yourself.
Mm.
That if we allow ourselves to be students of ourselves rather than, it takes time to get out of victim mode. That's what we're trying to help people do. Like, if you don't want to be the forever victim, because there is no joy in that. There is no peace in being the forever victim. That's not to invalidate the experiences.
No.
It's I think it's really important for people to give themselves allowance to be an actual student, because the neuroplasticity is something that fascinates me. If you look back to when we were children and raised in this organization, we come into this world and everybody, even religion, outside of religion, we're all indoctrinated in some way. The ideologies of our parents, culture, environment, all these things are put on us as babies. That's neuroplasticity right there. The brain is being rewired. And then as you go to school and you have experiences and you navigate your way through life, this is just another one of those experiences. It may oversimplify deconstruction, but this is another one of those experiences where we're just going to kind of rewire our brain a little bit, or a lot of it, and see where the road takes us. Would you agree that taking a different viewpoint and saying, all right, I'm going to be a student of myself, I'm going to be a student of the tactics of the organization, and then I'm going to move forward with that. Would you agree that that's a healthy approach? And if you could expound on what that looks like at the end for clients and leaders.
Yeah, you're asking really good questions.
Deep questions.
Yeah, I love them. So the opposite of fear isn't courage. It's kind of cliche to say that at this point. It's not. In order for courage to exist, fear has to be present, right? Otherwise, there's no courage necessary. The real antidote to fear is curiosity. You know, if you can be curious about something, then the fear aspect kind of gets taken away. If someone was scared of spiders, for instance, as soon as you go, oh, they're just so weird, and then the curiosity kicks in and you look at, how's that freaking little leg thing working? And what are these little buzzy things on the front? And you get curious, and then you may not like it, but it's not rendering you in a state of emotional subjection through fear. So by getting curious about ourselves, about our own experience, and it's not invalidating our emotions and saying, oh, these are wrong or they're not valid. They are, but also realizing, like the person who commented said, they're not facts. They're a biological response. They're a psychophysiological response to various stimulus.
Right.
When you get curious about that, as kind of mechanistic as it sounds, it helps you to then trace it back and see, well, what were the triggers that caused that? And suddenly you become the consciousness that's observing the pattern rather than the consciousness that's kind of trapped in the pattern, acting it out. So yeah, it gives you that neuroplasticity. And from that place of awareness, then you can start bringing the other skills you develop, even just the skill of choice. Of saying, well, I've noticed myself doing this behavior. That's really not in my best interest, so I'm going to try something different now.
I love that, because it's not good versus bad.
No.
It's healthy versus unhealthy for me, individualized. One of my best quotes, again, I love cliches. I have a Pinterest board of cliche quotes, because sometimes that's why they're a cliche. They just stick, right? Faith and fear. Faith and fear are both a belief in something unseen. It expels the same amount of energy if you really think about it. So I love that you talked about fear, and the opposite of fear is, what did you say it is? The opposite of fear is
curiosity.
So how would someone deconstructing get to that point of being curious, and how does it move them forward? I want to give disclaimers here that yes, everyone is on a different journey and everyone's at different levels, all of our viewers. But for the most part, how does someone get to that point of curiosity, overcoming their fears?
I think it's worth mentioning that regardless of what therapeutic or healing modality you might be using, the real work is always being done by you. It's not the magic therapist waving a magic wand, making it happen. Excellent. They're more like the personal trainer at the gym saying, hey, move this way or lift this heavy object and then put it down again. But it's you doing the work that's making it happen. So to get to that point, then that's a really nuanced question. To get to that point, there's generally a breaking point. There's a breaking point where we stop and we look at ourselves and say, look, how's my life right now? How are things going? How are my relationships? How's my career? Like this is the only life that I know for sure that I have. And this is how I've spent it so far. This is how I'm passing my days. This is how I'm feeling on a day-to-day basis, how I'm speaking to myself on a day-to-day basis. And when you stop and you look at that, if that doesn't make you feel good, or if you wouldn't wish that on someone you care about, then there's this like, there's just that breaking point where you go, look, something has to change. And when you make that decision that come hell or high water, I'm going to find a way to make this better, that determination to do it regardless of how difficult it is, that then tends to clear the way for more easy, more elegant, more effective ways to reveal themselves to you, because it's like your mind goes, oh wow, she's really serious about this. And then there's a part of the brain called the reticular activating system. It's a circuit that highlights things that are relevant to you, things that are important. So if you've ever, for instance, bought a certain pair of shoes or a certain car or a certain top, suddenly you'll see that thing all over the place. And it's like, oh my God, I'm a fashion icon, everyone's copying me. Well, no, those were always present, but because it's relevant to you, your reticular activating system, which is just at the kind of top of your neck there, it's saying, look at this stuff. This is relevant, this is an opportunity, or this is a threat potentially as well. When you make that decision to take back that control, when you make the decision to find resources to help you heal, that same part of your brain is scanning and will present things that are relevant to you. And so it might feel like synchronicities, it can feel like manifestation, all of these things. It's all explaining this process of the right things coming into your life at the right time.
I really appreciate that fact, because I know that earlier we talked about this fellowshipping and how I thought it was the best thing that's ever happened to me. And I know other witnesses have thought that as well. And it is in fact a trauma to be shunned and ostracized from your social circle. But in addition, trauma doesn't go away, but we reframe it and we're able to move forward, not move on. We're able to move forward with our lives. That being said, for me personally, I got curious. I remember being disfellowshipped, and this was like 15 years ago. So, of course, I've had time to go through it and mull it over. But I remember at the time, why is this happening to me? Crossed my mind. And all these years later, now I'm like, now I know why it happened for me. So interestingly, I thought to myself, it's the best thing that ever happened to me. But that was where the indoctrination was actually telling me that. It didn't make me a better person. It made me a more traumatized person. But now, all these years later, I don't think it was the best thing that ever happened to me. But I do think that there is a part of my history that I never want to forget, because otherwise I'll never see how far I've come. And now that I have been through those experiences, and stop me if you agree with me or disagree with me, that going through those traumatic things in that organization is the very reason I'm able to sit in the pain with other people who are now experiencing the shunning. Was it horrible at that moment? Absolutely. But now I can easily say, wow, you know what? I went through it, and now I'm at the point of being curious. Why did this happen to me? Why do they think it's okay? And just this list of questions that go through my mind once I stepped out of it happening to me, once I stepped out of being a victim. And I think that's the kind of work that's important. I think that's what we're trying to do here, is to help people kind of identify with the fact that they can move forward. It takes time.
Yeah. Well, your mind is like a search engine. If you go into Google and you type in poverty, all the results that you'll come up will be, results around poverty.
Right.
If you type in abundance, then all the results that will come up will be around abundance. Your mind is similar, and your subconscious mind is, you could call it amoral. It's not thinking good or bad. It's not thinking, oh, is this helpful or not? It's just saying, well, what is your command? I'll do as you command. So when we go inside and we ask questions like, oh, why does this keep happening to me? Why does everyone always abandon me? Why do I feel so alone?
Mm-hmm.
So, well, that's the question we've typed into the search engine. So our mind's going to go, like, this file clerk in our head's going to go rummaging around. It's like, well, here's 100 reasons why you're a piece of crap who no one could ever love. Great.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Very
Like
helpful.
confirmation bias.
Yeah.
You speak
So,
things into reality and truth.
so like affirmations are a really great personal development tool. I also am a big fan of asking better questions, because then when you ask a positive question, then your mind comes up with its own affirmations for its own reasons.
Yes. For example, when my kids come home from school, tell me tell me something good that happened today.
Yeah.
What did you love about dinner tonight? Things like that, because it automatically puts them in the mind for something positive, not how was school today? Good, or something like that. Is that what you're referring to? Is asking appropriate questions? That's oversimplifying. Asking the appropriate questions.
No, it's training that reticular activating system. It's saying, what do I want to filter for in my reality, in my experience? So when we're asking, instead of saying, why am I so broken? Why do I feel so helpless? Why do I feel so lost? You'll hear this creeping in people's language when they speak to you. Instead of asking questions like that, which will only give more and more reasons why we feel weighed down, why we feel lost, if we then, still without denying the reality, but if we say, how can I learn to move forward? How can I overcome this? That begins the filtering process for things that are actually empowering, things that aren't wallpapering over problems and saying they don't exist, because that's stupid.
Right.
It's giving us the lens to look through, where we can now begin to highlight the resources that actually will be helpful, the people, connections, support groups, opportunities, classes, books. These things start to jump out to us because we're asking a better question, and then that's priming our brain to literally scan the world for everything that can help us in doing that.
I really appreciate that fact, Jonam, because I remember being in the organization and not having my own viewpoint on anything. Like you said earlier, whose thoughts are these? Whose direction is this? And I can absolutely say with certainty that it wasn't mine. But in addition to that, I didn't know what mine even sounded like. I know I speak for so many witnesses who feel the same way. Once you leave, not only do you lose people, but you lose your stability. You lose your grounding of, what do I even want in life? It's very disorienting. And to get curious about that, I think that is one of the things that really can be healing. Is, okay, I don't have anywhere to go right now. I don't know what to think, but that's a blank canvas. And that's the beauty of it. I never realized that until listening to you. That was a blank canvas that I had handed to me. Like, everything's being wiped away from you. You've woken up from mind control. That's a huge step. I think we're convinced that waking up and no longer believing it anymore we're told that it's bad, makes us bad people. There's so much bad. That word bad is attached to our existence as we grow up, but really it's a gift. Have that blank canvas just handed to us and say, here's a blank canvas, do what you want with it. There's no art. All art is good art, right?
It's a huge opportunity. And that's not just a kind of happy clappy, I'm going to think positively about this awful situation.
Well,
it's legitimately true.
Toxic positivity is also rampant nowadays. Like, just choose joy.
High vibes only. No.
God, please.
No. You're carrying around a rucksack full of crud and it's denying that it stinks. That's not going to do anyone any favors. You will have no friends.
Right.
But in terms of connecting with yourself and finding what do you want, here's the thing: we all have this voice. There's this voice inside of your head, inside of mine, that is giving you the best advice. It's there. It's got your back. It cares for you. It tells you, hey, here's a really good opportunity, or that thing, stay away from that. This is a good situation. This is a bad one. This is a really good person. We really like this person. This person's not so good. Every single one of us is born with that voice, or
the true self. That's what it's
right.
You're born with it, but it's just kind of old when you're indoctrinated.
It gets layered, and just like anyone, right? if there was a person who was just constantly told to shut up, eventually they'd be like, well, you know, fuck yourself. But I should have checked about adult language. But
So you're fine.
as we learn to stop ignoring that, then when you actually think back and see, well, when was that voice of intuition kind of giving me a nudge? And when did I pay attention to it, and when did I not? Most people I speak to, in fact, every person I've spoken to who's been in a narcissistic relationship romantically, without fail, they all say, I should have seen this coming. There were these red flags right at the beginning. I knew there was something wrong there, but I didn't listen to myself. Right? That self that we didn't listen to, and we can trace that back to moments. I remember being in the organization as a teenager. I was doing research. I was reading all my conspiracy theories about lizards and reptiles, and I was like pre-QAnon type of all that stuff, and I loved it. But it kind of spooked me, and I was asking questions about the organization, and then I stopped asking because the answers weren't coming. And I said, well, I can't lose all of this. I can't lose my family, my friends, my certainty.
Sure.
And so I shelved the questions, and I kind of bottled up that voice that was saying something's not right here. And I can trace that back. When you look back through your life, you can find these points where your inner voice of intuition, your inner voice of wisdom, however you'd like to think of it, was saying, you know, pay attention to this, or not that, this. And just realizing it's always been there. One, we can start to repair that relationship with ourselves, and then you can move into the future and start to pay attention to those nudges that come from within you, saying, "Hey, this is a good thing," or "Look out for that thing."
And I also appreciate that fact, because having been in a family of narcissism, and in fact, as Jehovah's Witnesses, that is another one of our common ground, is that we are all victims of narcissistic abuse. That's what high control religion is, right? And so I don't know about how many. I'm sure there's. What am I saying here? I know most people that I speak with have this inner dialogue of, "Am I crazy?" Or, and you'll find that is also a reaction from narcissistic abuse, because, and it's so confusing, you cannot make sense of the confusion, and you'll waste so much energy trying to make sense. The confusion is part of the control. So when you ask questions, you're a conspiracy theorist. They ask questions, it's an investigation. And that's how they do it, right? But to be an investigator, we have every right to be an investigator. Every right.
Confusion makes us suggestible. There's a whole thing in hypnotherapy called a confusion induction, and what that is that the more confused a mind is, it's going to grab for some kind of certainty. So you can see this at one of the ways that this is done is by creating this mental scramble. People like stage magicians do this a lot, and then suddenly you give a simple command like sleep or close your eyes, and suddenly you've got someone passed out in the middle of a hotel lobby or in the middle of the stage, laying down in the middle of the floor. Makes no sense at all. You would not do that. But because they're confused, our mind is going, I don't know what to do. I don't know where's up or down. Oh, here's something I understand. Close my eyes. Give him my wallet. Darren Brown did some things. You can see it on YouTube. It's hilarious the way he does it. But it's revealing that when we're confused, we become suggestible, we become open to commands. So being in this state of cognitive dissonance where the world isn't making sense from this standpoint, but this is the only standpoint that's allowed, it forcibly kept us in that state of confusion. And then we're in this closed loop. We're in this confusion, the susceptibility, and all of these different mind control mechanisms kept us stuck. As we leave, then this is where, as you do the self-inquiry, as you do the healing work, you're gradually creating more stability within yourself rather than these crutches outside of yourself.
Wow. I could listen to you talk about this all day. So what does life look like for you now, Jonam? After you've been through all of this, after you've been disfellowshipped, what do things look like for you now? Clearly you've mastered this whole process, going through the healing process. What do things look like for you now?
Well, it's a continual journey of self-discovery and self-development. And that's such a cliche kind of corny answer, but
It's true.
I live and breathe this stuff, right? Like you said before, there's this blank canvas has been put in front of us, and it's like, what do you want to do with it?
Yeah.
And so that's exciting to me, right? So figuring out, well, what am I going to learn next? What am I going to do next? There's been huge focus on this, this work, because I believe it's so important, and I want to bring the skills and the tools that have helped me and just make that commonly available to other survivors of toxic religion. And that's, so at the moment that takes up a lot of my bandwidth, and I'm thinking about it, and again I'm like this mad scientist in a laboratory kind of putting all this stuff together. But I'm really loving that, because outside of that, then it's a case of exploring, well, what do healthy friendships look like? What does healthy participation in the community around me look like? How can I be a good neighbor? How can I be a good friend? And this, people talk a lot about life purpose, right? And you can get metaphysical and all spiritual and all this about it.
Oh yeah.
And that's fine. But just a real simple starting point is, well, what's the life purpose of a tree? What's the life purpose of a flower? It's to become the healthiest, fullest expression of itself. And so thinking about that for me is discovering that. It's, well, what's the fullest, what's the truest expression of these things that are inside me, my own gifts, my own passions and interests, and allowing that to fill up that canvas, as it were. So it doesn't have to stay bottled up. It can be expressed, it can be explored. So yeah, that's kind of a convoluted answer, but
no. But would you say that feeling this way about people and yourself, when we're on the inside, we're taught to be Christ-like, empathetic. We're taught to be giving. I don't know about you, but I feel I am more of those things now that I'm out, as opposed to being in, more giving. Yeah. And granted, when you leave, for men that I've spoken with, if they have a position in the congregation, they want to funnel that energy into something else once they leave. For women, it's a little bit more difficult because we're subdued a lot. And so would you say that now you feel kind of more of an open-minded, open-hearted person than you were when you were in religion and told to be those things?
Yeah, definitely. And it's not that I wasn't this person before, but it's like the expression of it is unconditional now.
Correct.
If I'll care about another human being, and I'll want the best for them, and say, hey, I really hope you're happy. Or I might not say that out loud, but I'll think that, if I walk down the street and I see someone looking a bit miserable, it's like, oh, come on, no, buck up, life's going to get better, and you wish them the best. But I'm doing that, and that's coming from in here, rather than some checklist of, have I done a Christ-like thought today?
Yes. Or it's kind of like, I really don't know your experience. I really don't know more than you, because you're living your life. Whereas as a Jehovah's Witness, it was, oh, but I know something you don't know, and I'm going to pull you into this, and that's going to change your whole life. Like, that's the overall mindset, especially pioneering. You just kind of were counting hours, not really paying much attention to people, going through a script of sorts to tell people, not really sitting in their pain with them, not really feeling what they felt and hearing their experiences and wanting the best for them based on their life and their choices. That was nothing I had experienced in that organization. But now it's like, I want to know you, and I want to know how you are going to help yourself. I'm just here to kind of navigate, like kind of cheer you on. That's much more Christ-like, in my opinion.
Yeah, that was the real weird thing. I was disfellowshipped. I tried to be reinstated for another 2 years. I was sat there reading the Bible. We mentioned this when we spoke on the phone, right? I was reading the Bible and then looking up, and because you can't answer, you can't participate in the meetings. There's no social aspect. So I had all this time on my hands, and I was like, well, I'll read the scriptures around like a good little Christian. And the more I read it, I'm like, well, this Jesus guy seems like I'd hang out with him. But then I look around and I'm like, well, what's being taught, what's being practiced, what's being instituted as a policy and then enforced on pain of ostracism? None of that is matching this. So yeah, this discrepancy between being a Christ-like good Christian versus being a Jehovah's Witness, that was actually the thin end of the wedge for me that helped me to wake up and realize this really isn't the place to be. So absolutely, yeah.
Wow, fascinating. Listen, I want to have you back on here. Maybe we could talk about a different topic because I know
Yes.
your expertise is so it goes so much deeper than just something one YouTube video can cover. So I would love to have you back on. And if someone wanted to reach out to you, where can they find you? And tell us a little bit about your programs and what you offer.
Bless you. Thank you very much. And I've loved being here and chatting with you. So the best place to find me is the website is religionrehab.co.uk. So that's the website. There's a ton of free resources on there. I'm a huge believer in try before you buy, right? And also just making as much freely available as possible. It's like, look, just have the experience, have the resources, see what works for you. That's a great place just to find things, webinars, podcasts, etc. If you're on Facebook, you can connect with me personally, which is just my name, which I assume will be in the title. And also I have a Facebook group as well called Religion Rehab. And so that's where I share things on my personal profile. In the Facebook group is where I'll share a bit more in-depth information, articles, videos, other resources, workbooks, podcast episodes. And the approach is very much around trying to find practical solutions to these challenges. So between the website religionrehab.co.uk, my Facebook profile, or you can send an email to jonam@religionrehab.co.uk, and that always comes through to me as well. So those are the best places to connect and to reach out.
And one more question, since you're currently disfellowshipped,
Yes.
what does that look like for you?
Ooh. It's freedom, and it's inconsequential in its own way. It's like, that's like saying I'm disqualified from a game of chess that I played when I was 12. You know, it's kind of like, well, it's technically true, but I'm not worried about that chess game anymore. I'm over here doing something else.
Inconsequential. So you are currently being shunned, and it gets to the point where you're like, I mean, that's their choice. And
I don't view it that I've lost the people who don't speak to me. I view it that I've found my freedom. And they haven't even lost me. They've chosen, because my door's open, you know, and if they wanted to touch base and say, hey, I'm still going to be a witness, but I really want to be friends with you, I wouldn't be a douche about it. I'd be a good friend still. So
yeah,
nothing has been lost, but there's this imaginary game that they are stuck in. And that's really sad for them, but I've escaped. And at some point you have to stop grieving from the things we've lost in the past and start celebrating what we can do now, like you said about the canvas metaphor.
What a beautiful way to look at it. And that's what this channel is about. Like we want the positive aspect of I love that you call it rehab, because it's exactly what it is. It's a chance to rehabilitate, which is a process. It's not an event. A lot of people think waking up is just this one and done thing. I should be over this by now. And, you know, even it's just not linear. Even people who've been out for decades still have those moments where maybe, what if it is true? Or that's what indoctrination does. So, Jonam, thank you so much for being on our show. And we're definitely going to have you back again sometime in the future. We'll pick a topic. All right?
Yeah, I'd love that. Thank you so much. Thank you for the work you're doing as well. It's just great to be sharing this space with you as well.
Yeah,
Thank
a lot of healing is what we want to talk about.
Yes.
All right, well, I'll catch you next time.
Cheers. Thanks, Wendy.
Really hoped you enjoyed this interview with Jonam, and all of his contact information is right there in the description box, so be sure to check that out. And remember, if you want to come on the show, if you have a skill you would like to share with our viewers, if you have a story you want to share, for every person that comes on this show, there's a person in the audience who has that moment where they say, that person is me. That's my life. They're living my story. And that's why I do this. That's why we're doing this, you guys. If you're out of the religion and you are not the type to want to get on camera, just you coming on this show or any other activist shows, people are watching. PMOs are watching. And we're all looking for that external validation. We're all looking for that moment where we're, you know, this person gets me. This person resonates with me. I know this person will understand my story. And I have had nothing but great feedback. Guests that I've had on the show where people like yourself who are watching will reach out to those members who avail themselves to then reach back out to you and pull you up. That's what we're doing here. Again, if you want to be on the show, email me at wendyrenee@gmail.com. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.